economic order. You must not have an identity protest in Australia. The second lie is an interesting one. As you know, the secret police have been training for years to combat this thing called Muslim terrorism. Supposedly, secret cells of mad mullahs who turn up and they train a few people in their religious schools and they create a violence network, and they plan to drive an aeroplane into the Summit restaurant one night when you're all there. This sort of stuff is the model that they put up to combat terror. But what they saw in the 3 or 4 days after the Cronulla riot was something different. They saw hundreds of alienated, deracinated, deculturated, criminal men, many of whom, by the way, have been signed up by the Australian Labor Party as members in the branch stacks in Bankstown and Lakemba and Belmore and so forth. These young men, totally alienated from an Australian society into which they do not fit and never will fit and always hate, become marketably available for small cells of men of violence in Australia. They never expected that this might be the type of terrorist who they would have to fight. So they come out with this cumbersome lie that the Aussie boys were drunk, as if that's going to send them home. It's an act of imbecility. What actually took place at Cronulla, I coined the term and I believe it was taken up by a couple of journos, was actually a civil uprising. Australia has had several civil uprisings, and all political change, wherever it is, and I take issue with some of your speakers here, does not come from lobbying or whatever. It comes from mass action. The great changes of democracy in Australia resulted from the Eureka Stockade. The great changes on immigration began at Lambing Flat, and the great achievements in a social legislation began at Barcaldine in Queensland. What took place at Cronulla was a civil uprising. It's had a number of results, massive political results. We have seen in this state at least the full expose of political policing. We have seen that not only are our police being compelled to, but at the hierarchy, quite happy to be so, weak on prosecuting various types of people for social and racial and other types of crime. But we have actually seen in the hierarchy of the police force a totally myopic, narrow view in the prosecutions of the people responsible for the so-called violence at Cronulla. We all know the stories: suppressed video material of certain immigrant groups who've done dire violence, lies about whether they can trace these men or not. But what we do see is the stigmatisation of a number of Australians who may well have broken the law. We accept that. They may have done criminal acts. It's not really the point. But we see a total focus on getting every single last one of these guys prosecuted. Why would you want to do that? If not to curry favour with certain minorities and to intimidate the Australian community. We've also seen the total weakness of the multicultural and multiracial doctrine. There is no community here. There is not even a community to divide. It's already divided, and it's only united by capitalism. It's only united by the fact that they all participate in the marketplace. What we do see is deep and deepening divisions between some of the intrusive groups. We also see right now violence dished out by Arab and Muslim groups towards Tongan Christians and South Sea Island Christians and Sudanese animists and so on and so forth. What we actually see is that the society, the mythic society that was to be created, is also itself coming apart at the seams. As I said to you before, the power of mass action was demonstrated on this point. What does disturb me, and I think it's a very important point to disturb, is this. I was interviewed last week by the St George and Sutherland Shire leader, and I gave these words: that while I cannot say to you that no person should not nominate his son, his daughter or his mate to the police for participating in these illegal incidents, if I said that, that would itself be a crime. But what I can say to you is anyone who did that would suffer from a very, very low case of moral self-esteem. That I did say. What we have seen, however, is many people, because illegal actions were committed, the bourgeois, the wiseacre, what does he do? He runs away. He wouldn't have done that, would he? He wouldn't have broken the law. He wouldn't have stepped outside of convention. Well, I know I didn't that day. right? Some young men did, we know that. But what we see is that all of these people are simply to be abandoned to their fate, abandoned to the courts, abandoned to the false charge, according to a good friend of mine, a senior counsel, of a fray that can get you locked up for 10 years. What we see is no political defence of the men who may well have broken the criminal law. But the point is not the breaking of the criminal law. The point is, why did they break the criminal law? They broke the criminal law because of years and years of inaction and frustration at the refusal of the authorities to do what theoretically they should do, and now the misattention of the authorities to prosecute them and let other groups go. When that happens, ladies and gentlemen, there is no law. That is political prosecution, and these men should be politically defended. But by and large, a lot of people who call themselves patriots don't want to do that, because what that means is they are associating themselves with someone who broke the criminal law. Whoopie-doo. We even have a parliamentary seat called Layla, named after Peter Layla. He broke the criminal law too. There is a great attempt to restrain and contain the upsurge. We've seen that the multicultural industry has come from everywhere. There are projects and touchy-feely things all over the Sutherland Shire, and they're spending $50,000 down there on a school education program. But what did Four Corners tell you last week? It could all happen again. It could all happen again so easily, because there is no unity in the false society that is in fact being created. We know that none of these groups, the intrusive groups, have any particular feelings for each other, and certainly do we really believe that because of some policing and patrolling the beach areas that the hatred, these fundamental hatreds of the intrusive groups for the native Australian has gone away? No, I don't think so. The moment the police go, the thugs will return. That's a fact. And if they can't return there, they'll simply return somewhere else. It's endemic. It's become a social, logical problem. It will not go away. We've also seen, as I said before in the media, a decisive campaign to stigmatise these youth and anyone who defends them or anyone else as a racist and a white supremacist and a drunkard and a no good, and they've dragged out a few kids to say how sorry they are for what they did and they parade them. It's almost like a Stalinist show trial where people get up and confess their moral sins in front of everybody else. That's the circus that's being run by the Australian establishment. I think there needs also to be, parenthetically, a lot more unity amongst patriotic people. I won't name the group, I won't say a word, but I will say that one patriotic group banned me personally from coming to any more of their functions in New South Wales. Possibly it was because I defended these men, I don't know. But I hope to work that out, and I'd like that rescinded. There is in Australia right now a new politics that's arisen post-Cronulla of race and identity. The fact of the matter is that the Liberal Party, as we know, has begun to produce a very interesting wishy-washy type of pseudo-patriotism that says that anyone in Australia can be Australian if they accept what they call Australian values. John Howard has said that, and Peter Costello went even further. He spoke there a couple of weeks ago at the Sydney Institute